Get my 6. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid. I've got quite the task ahead of me here this afternoon. I'm finally going to get around to sawing up the rest of this massive red oak behind me into lengths so I can split it down. And firewood, some of this stuff is like 3 feet wide. As such, I figured it's best I sit here and study on it a while so I know exactly what to do before I get started. See, there's so many different ways to do something like this. You got to figure out the best way. So while I'm sitting here, biding my time, trying to figure it out, hoping maybe my wife comes up with something else for me to do so I don't have to quite jump into it just yet. Thought I'd tell a story. So I'm going to talk for a bit, and as such, I've brought my water in order to stay hydrated. Let me take just a sip. Oh yeah, by the way, in case you haven't heard, Bigfoot Sasquatch Files Volume 13 is now available in print and Kindle on Amazon. The link's in the description box below. So, yesterday morning, I did something for only the second time in 16 years. Had to go back and figure it out. The last time I did this, George W. Bush was president. What is it that I did? You might be asking. I did what's called speed work. Any runners out there know exactly what that is. That's basically you sprint. It's also known as interval sessions. It's when you can go to a track and do, either sprint 100, 200, 400, 800, 1200. It depends on what you're into, what you're looking for, I got one of those measuring wheels and I measured off 100 meters on my property and I just did 100 meter sprints. Did it once last week. Great, because I'm trying to get faster. I'm in shape now. I've lost more than 30 pounds now and I'm running all the time, but I'm running slowly because that's all I do is I just run. Slowly, slow. They call it LSD. And no, it's not a drug. That stands for long, slow distance. It's a great way to cut weight, but all long, slow distance really creates is long, slow runners. So we're trying to get faster now. Started doing some speed work. Last week's speed work session, again, the first time in over 16 years, went great. I was surprised. Yesterday mornings, not so much because I strained a muscle. I didn't pull the muscle, I strained it. As such, today, instead of doing a recovery run, I decided to go mountain biking. And I've only mountain biked a few times so far this year because we're still coming out of winter, even though the weather's nice, spring-like weather here. It's not quite spring just yet. I don't mountain bike much in the winter because of the snow and the ice. So anyway, I did a loop I hadn't done since last fall. And I noticed an older woman out, probably in her early 70s. Doesn't look it though. I'm telling you, folks around here, it's a very healthy, very fit area. Before coming out today, I saw what must have been 20 cyclists go by the house out here, and none of them were under retirement age. I mean, it's a very healthy community. I love that about it. One of the many things I love about it. So I saw this woman that I've spoken to a few times in over the years when I'd be out that way mountain biking. And she was telling me that the folks across the road from her, the property was on the market. I saw the for sale sign. And the point of that, the whole thing about the running is not to keep you up to date with my training regimen. It's to tell you why I happened to be out there this morning mountain biking rather than doing a recovery run after a speed workout. Well, I didn't want to pull the muscle. It was strained, and so I'll be able to run again tomorrow. But anyway, I was out there mountain biking, saw her. I said, "Oh, so I guess those folks over there, did they leave? Are they still there? They're going to wait until they sell the property and until they're gone?" And she said, "No, they went back to Iowa." She said over the winter, and they had been here just a few years. And I actually talked to the man once that owned the property. Actually, it was his wife. So I'm going to tell you the story. He was probably mid-50s. And I never met his wife. He told me that they had a son that was 18. I don't know if he was still in high school or if he was finished, but I was out there, it would have been 2 years or so ago now, mountain biking. It was summer. It was very hot. I had actually stopped in that location to refill my water bottle. I drank all the water in my water bottle on my bike and needed a refill. And a stream goes through there, and I'm telling you, we're in the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. And that stream that flows along that dirt road I mountain bike on and run and sometimes go walking with my family comes straight off of the top of the mountains back here behind me, out of a spring somewhere. There's no residential communities anywhere before the stream comes off the mountain. There are no plants. There's no businesses. This is just the cleanest water you could imagine. So it's perfectly safe to fill my bottle up with this water to get it. And that's what I was doing when I saw the guy. And he approached me. He was clearing some brush on the other side of the creek bed. And he said hello. I said hi. I said, I hope you don't mind me stealing some of your water. He said, take as much as you want. It's always flowing. And I was drinking water and catching my breath a bit. And a bit of small talk came up. His name was Greg. Pretty simple, straightforward name to remember. And he told me he had only lived in the area for a couple of years. And I told him, well, I'm newish. I mean, we've been here going on 6 years now. But this, again, a couple of years ago, I'd only been here 3 or 4 years. And he asked where I came from. And I told him that my family and I had recently moved here from the Philippines. Gave him the short version. And he was like, wow, I don't feel like I'm from so far away now, coming from Iowa. And I said, Iowa, wow, that's interesting. What would bring one from Iowa to Central Virginia? Of course, the answer is always UVA, something associated with university. But in this instance, it wasn't. He said, my wife inherited some land, the land they were living on out there, a couple 100 acres, from an uncle she never knew she had. And I was like, wow, that's like everybody's fantasy. He says, I know, right? He says they were in Iowa. They were running a lawn care business, small family-owned business. And he's picked up the same thing out here. He brought his equipment out with him. And I said, well, you got 200 acres. Do you even really need to work anymore? And he says, yeah, actually I do. He said, that's the odd thing about it. He says, we got the land. It was set up in, what do they call it, a conservatorship. You do this thing with the government where you promise to never develop your land. And it happens a lot around here. And frankly, I kind of like it because Charlottesville downtown and all on the outskirts is building up like crazy. It's growing into Richmond. It's growing into Fredericksburg. It's growing into Washington, D.C., heading north on 29. But out our way, got a lot of land that's been in families for centuries. And the folks have put it into these conservatorships, so it can never be developed, which is a wonderful thing because it will look like this land isn't in a conservatorship. I haven't even entertained the idea of doing it. I don't have any plans to build a subdivision here. I'd like to just keep it for myself and my family. But the good part of it is that the land out here that looks like this now, that looked like this 100 years ago, will look like this 100 years from now because of this. So he said that put them in the... Seriously, if you're not getting my 6 right now, you need to be, because it sounds as if we may have company approaching. At any rate, Greg went on to tell me that they were in the odd predicament of inheriting this vast amount of land. I mean, who's going to, laugh at 200 to 300 acres in Central Virginia, right outside of Charlottesville? It's worth a fortune. But there were no assets other than the land. There were no stocks, no bonds, no mutual funds, no cash, no bank accounts. And being that, he told me, he said they weren't rich people, before they got this land. And so it's not like they had piles enough of a nest egg saved up to where they couldn't work. So he must continue to work. And he actually hit me up for business, wanted to know, I told him where I lived and he knew the place. Remember all those trees I planted out there in the front of my property when we first moved in here to create a privacy hedge? That was 5 years ago now. And those Leland cypress trees that were 18 inches tall when we planted them, some of them are 20 feet tall now. And I'm so glad that we planted those trees and then waited to sit back and watch them grow rather than to wait to plant the trees. But my point of that is that I guess this guy, and he's one of many, I've since met other neighbors out this way, since the initial rash I got from the hay collector has worn off and I finally let my guard down, realizing that, I knew there was some really good folks out here. I just wasn't really giving them a fair chance because of our first impression with one bad apple. But that's past, and we're doing okay out here now, meeting some really wonderful people. But I've come to know from meeting these people like Greg and others that I'm the tree guy. Yeah, I mean, just within the last year or so, I guess because this used to just be a hay field with what looked like an abandoned house on it, and then all of a sudden his family moves in and they plant more than 2,000 trees everywhere. So I'm the tree guy. It's fitting. I'm not butthurt about it, as the cool kids would say, because trust me, I've got nicknames for all of them too. We just won't share that here, as I found out half of them watch these videos. Perhaps more than half. I hope an equal amount of them are reading my books. So anyway, Greg couldn't sell the land. There was this, so they couldn't even sell part of it. Like a lot of folks will inherit land and it's like, oh, this is great. Too bad we don't have the money to go with it. We'll sell half the land and now we do. And then of course development starts up. So the way things were set up, he just can't do that. And the way it was set up in trust, can't do it. And I said, well, that sounds really, really, really odd. That you would inherit this big chunk of, acreage, but nothing, in the way of the financial ability to care for it. And he said, yeah, well, what's really weird is they thought it was a joke when they were living their lives in Iowa. They had a teenage kid in high school working from sun up till sundown during the summer months, spring, early fall. He said he plowed snow in the winter. And they just found out that they had inherited this vast estate in Central Virginia. And they thought it was a joke. And it turns out his wife was like a very distant relative. I mean, so distant, she had no clue this uncle existed, and she knew of no one. Once it went past a certain cousin of hers where the lineage continued, she knew one cousin where she could trace the lineage, and from everybody there back, she knew nothing. And the cousin is somebody she met as a child she'd never seen since. So it just seemed odd. Why her? This is what Greg, her husband, was telling me. And he said something that I remember at the time struck me as odd, that I forgotten about, then remembered this morning when I was talking to this wonderful woman that lives across from him. He said that it was as if no one wanted the land. He and his wife just felt like no one wanted the land. He said that they'd walked it. About half of it was pasture. And he allowed some local farmers out there to graze their cattle on it and cut the hay. He kept the same agreement that whoever had the uncle had before. He said, but once you get back on the back portion of land, you hit forest, and it went up pretty steep, and there were these rock cliffs. He said that he and his wife, in their first year there, just walked all over the land, trying to figure out the lay of the land. Those frogs are so loud, they're actually distracting. And it's several hours early for that. So anyway, he mentioned that there was an odd place on the land where you could climb up on top of rocks and look down the hill going the other way, where there appeared to be a bunch of boxwood, which can be a pricey bush if you're familiar with it. It's common around older estates. It's common around graveyards. It's a beautiful bush, a densely growing evergreen that a lot of people use for privacy hedges. We use Leland cypresses because our 18-inch tall Leland cypresses cost $24.99 at Walmart.com in the winter when they're off season. That's when we buy them because they'll be twice that much and 3 months later, about this time of year, March. Boxwood of the same size, you're looking at least $100. So it's expensive and it grows slowly. Leland cypress grows once the roots are established about 5 feet per year, very fast growing hedge. Boxwood, once the roots are established, which takes a few years, only grows 1 foot per year. So these boxwoods that they could see from that rock outcropping were huge, 20, 25 feet tall, and they went for as far as the eye could see. And they thought that was odd because of the fact that they don't occur wild, at least in central Virginia, out in the middle of the woods. You're not walking along in the woods and you see a hickory and a maple and a tulip poplar and a red oak. It's not going anywhere. That Husqvarna I got last year is an awesome saw. The only thing it doesn't do, though, is run itself. What a pity. Yeah, you don't pass all this in all these indigenous plant, shrub, and tree species, and oh, look, a boxwood. Somebody had to put them there. So somebody, once upon a time, put a ton of boxwoods on the other side of this rock outcropping. Now, he mentioned that they got down off the rocks and they walked over to the boxwood thicket just to see if they could get into it, see how far it went. They said it was very dense. They realized upon inspection it wasn't worth trying to get in there because, frankly, they thought they might get into it and they might get lost. So instead of trying to penetrate the boxwood and go through it, they started walking around it. And then when they got to a far side of it, they actually found an iron gate. A tall iron gate, about 12 feet tall with a big arch that had the family name on top of the gate. And they thought, wow, that's odd. And of course, he's telling me this story, and what I'm thinking is the fact that people also surrounded their properties with this, or their houses. And I'm thinking, is there a house in there? He never said. I didn't ask. I was starting to cool down. The conversation had lasted longer than it should have, so I jumped back on my bike and I left. I had all intentions of following up with him. He was a real likable guy. He was talkable, easy to talk with. And I thought, well, I'll certainly see him out here again sometime when I'm on another mountain bike ride, or when I'm on a long run, or maybe when I'm out here walking with my family. But I never did. I never saw the vehicle he drove, so I mean, I'm sure he's passed my house a million times. I'm sure he's passed the tree guy's house a million times. I just never knew what he was driving. That happens. I mean, we met a wonderful woman here a couple summers back from Thailand originally, and her wonderful husband who had moved here from somewhere. Since I know half my neighbors watch these, I'm not going to say where because I don't want to give it away. Well, they probably already know, from Montana. And I just, one day about maybe a month ago, when my son came home from school getting dropped off the bus, there was a car behind the bus honking on the horn, a truck rather. And I'd seen this truck go by the house a million times, and I looked over, and it was the Thai lady. And I was like, oh, hey, I didn't realize. So it's like, these things happen, okay? As observant as I am, sometimes I miss the obvious. So I never saw him again. So I was out there this morning mountain biking, saw this woman. I saw the for sale signs. And again, back to my original question, well, is the family still there? Have they left already? Are they waiting till they sell? And she said, oh, no, they packed up and went back to Iowa last summer. They'd only stayed a couple years. It's just they just now got the property listed. They had to go through so much legal rigmarole to like figure out how to get it out of trust so they could sell it. And that happened by way of, the way the lady told me, is basically there was nobody to contest their wishes. And so they had to allow for a certain period of time to pass, notify people that they had to show that they legitimately tried to track down any other family members and send a letter through their lawyer claiming so and so now, owns the property. It's been family property per the trust. People must be notified. Do you have a desire to purchase the property? Like first right of refusal. Nobody responded. So they finally were able to put the property on the market. But again, they left many months ago. Well, I asked the lady why, just out of curiosity. It's a beautiful place. And with the line of work the guy was in, he probably didn't have to travel very far to get his business. I mean, I'm like part of the minority where I live who actually cares for their own lawn. Most folks hire lawn care groundskeepers because they have, vast estates, and and a lot of them are older. They're retirees. And now a lot of them do it because they enjoy the work, but a lot of them have other things they'd rather do, and they just don't want to go out there and do lawn care. And I totally get that. I completely get that. They don't not do it because they're lazy. They're very much working on other projects. I'm telling you, people around here don't retire. They might, step away from that which they've done for 30 years, and after like 2 weeks, bam, they've got their own small business, or bam, they're consulting for the university or some big corporation. It's just, and I like that, because like the saying says, you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing. And a lot of these folks, they're great examples for a guy like me who's, nearing 50. They're living the way I want to continue to live when I'm in my 70s, and some of them in their 80s. Told you about an older gentleman, wrote a short story about it in Bigfoot Sasquatch Files Volume 12, about a guy I met last summer, like 84 years old, still cuts, splits, and stacks his own firewood with a freaking splitting maul and axe. So anyway, this is like, you've heard of a run-on sentence. I write plenty of them. This is becoming a run-on video. The woman says they discovered the maze. And I was like, okay, what maze? And she said, well, there's a vast boxwood thicket and I said, yeah, I know. When I talked to the guy just one time, he told me about it. Said him and his wife had discovered it when they were out walking the property, and he found the gate with the big arch on it. She says, yeah, that's it. She goes, look, she moved out here in the 1970s when a lot of the baby boomers were into that back to nature. It was like the post-hippie era. They were protesting through the 60s. The 70s came around. They had stopped protesting. Vietnam was over. They realized they needed to do something productive. But they still were not all into the system. So a lot of them took to the God's country, as it were, places like this, to live off the land largely. Those who could hack it stayed, like this woman. Those who didn't realized they missed those modern conveniences and luxury that the system that they so protested created for them, so they went back to it. But she stayed out here, and she said from the 70s, when she was new out here, she'd heard the stories, but she'd never actually seen it for herself. She'd seen the outside, the boxwood. But story has it that I guess it would be a great ancestor, many times great, of this woman from Iowa who inherited this land from an uncle she didn't even know she had, was the leader of a cult. Yes, a demonic, devil-worshipping cult. And they would have seances on the property. People would go missing on the property. And the only reason it stopped, according to the woman telling me the story, was that because by the 20th century, first part of the 20th century, early 1900s, it was a heck of a lot harder to get away with such things, even if you were wealthy, the things of which they were doing. She didn't go into detail, but she mentioned that within that maze, there are so many bodies buried, and she wholeheartedly believes that Greg and his wife, who I never had the honor to meet, messed around a little too much with that maze, penetrated that maze, and discovered some of the things that were in that maze, and they wanted nothing to do with that maze or the entire property, and they got the heck out of there as quickly as they finally came running to it when they found out they ain't inherited it. So this wood isn't going to cut itself, and the sun's not going to stay up all day. And I can see my beautiful bride Dearly, aka Giggly Girl, staring at me, rather glaring at me from the kitchen window, which means she's not thought of anything else for me to do. So it's best I get to cutting up this wood. So with that said, and one more reminder, as I must hydrate before I do this physical labor. By the way, that's not available in print, but Anthology 1, which includes volumes 1 through 10 is. It's available in print either on Amazon or from our Etsy store, the link of which is in the description box below. If you're ever at Etsy, look and see if my wife has her lumpia or egg rolls listed. They sell out in 48 hours every time she lists them. So you got to be looking daily if they're not there. If they're there, you better get them. Don't wait. And she's working on some delicious Filipino adobo peanuts right now too, so watch for that. In the meantime, see you for more next time. Just in case you forgot,